You're listening to the Veteran Etc. podcast, as there's always more to be said about a veteran. Join your host, Mike Kim, a veteran, ex-monk, seasoned war trauma therapist, and writer, as he shares his years of research in veteran readjustment culture and the meaning of warrior life. Now, here's your host, Mike Kim.
Veteran Etc. This is a show not just about veterans, but it's about veteran culture, veteran readjustment culture. That's something that I've been working on for several decades as far as like my research into understanding the daily lives of veterans, but not just our artifacts, our products, our movies, our books, but the different things that happen within our lives, the different policies that affect us, the different ways we get together, the different ways we organize to create better lives for us and for our families. And so on this episode, I'm beyond words, because when it comes to Joe Bello, he is someone that goes back decades in regards to community organizing, in regards to veterans. And when you talk about change and advocacy, which is the theme of this show, we've got a guy who has his own playbook, effective playbook, as well as textbook. And I had to get him here. I had to get him here after I read a recent article that he wrote. And just to let you know some things about Joe Bello. So not only is he an NYU graduate, but he also has a communications background with the late, great Dr. Neil Postman, someone who has written extensively on politics and the media. Joe Bello has had numerous positions, not just in the Navy, and also being in the Persian Gulf War, also being involved in local politics, in veteran issues, and also regarding the VA on a larger venue, a larger arena. And so I want to introduce Joe to all of you, and we want to see what's coming out of his playbook and textbook in regards to veteran advocacy. Joe, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and thank you for the kind words.
Well, let's start things off, Joe, with the article, the recent article that you had written, and Gotham Gazette, the true political newspaper, put out. And I just want to just kind of let you speak a little bit on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, here in New York City, we just had a turnover with all our elected officials. We had a new mayor, a new city council, new controller. And so with that comes new chairs for the committees, and we had a new chair for the Veterans Committee. And the individual that came in, you know, a lot of veterans, particularly those in Queens, thought this is an individual that's going to be very forceful, going to get things done. Things were going to like change, and the agency that's supposed to help veterans were going to be held more accountable. What we saw instead was it's like a committee that just didn't know where it was going, what it really wanted to do. It almost seemed bipolar to some extent. It just seemed very you had several council members who were, you know, questioning the agency about things, and you had the chair that kind of laid back. And, you know, a lot of us didn't know whether it was a good cop, bad cop scenario, or he just didn't want to be engaged, or what was going on. And so there was a lot of, you know, leading up to the summer months, there was a lot of confusion about what was going on, why the hearing, the topics were not relevant to the community, why there wasn't any pushback of the agency. And this while we were waiting for the mayor to appoint or reappoint the current commissioner. And so, you know, we got through the summer, and it left a lot of head scratching. And then The commissioner himself got caught up in a conflict of interest scandal, where he basically got a slap on the wrist. And as we started moving to the fall, I wanted to, I want to say give him a kick in the ass, but like make him like take a look and let the community know, like, look, these are the hearings that we should be at least discussing or having top hearings about. And so to try to give them some kind of help or just my thoughts on what kind of hearings we should be having that are more relevant to the veterans in the 5 boroughs, and ones that will actually make them come to the hearings to want to testify, because that was the other problem too, because the veterans stopped coming.
What were those particular issues in New York? What are these issues that you think are important that he should have been engaging?
Well, as I said in my article, look, we just came out of COVID. We're still in COVID, but we're really out of it at this point. And there was a lot of damage done in the community here in New York City. We had a large number of deaths for either World War II, Korean, Vietnam. Even some younger vets passed away from COVID. We had the nursing home scandals here in St. Albans. And that trickled also into like CUNY. A lot of student veterans left the
including
system.
me.
Yeah, like a lot of student veterans left the system, moved out. Everything was virtual. So literally they were collecting the New York City housing allowance that the VA gives, but they were living in North Carolina or Florida or Arizona. And so, some of the hearing topics were like, look, we need to talk about student veterans, like, hey, look, the war's over. We're not going to see the same cycle that we were seeing for the past 20 years. And we've lost a number of student veterans in the system. We need to know, what is CUNY doing about it? What's going on there? So that was a definitive topic. And then, we were all, there was a number of other topics as well, like legal.
Legal. And then you had said something about like homeless and but the legal is important. Can you share some of that?
Well, legal depends on what you're talking about with legal, but like right now,
the veteran courts were,
veteran courts, but it could be also child support.
Yes.
It could be immigration. There's a number of legal topics that were very, that are prevalent out here right now, particularly in the veterans community. But you're right, those, definitely like the veteran treatment courts are important, very important. And the fact that, a lot of them were run by veteran volunteers. Are those volunteers still there? Are they still around? Again, we have been fractured as a community. And so the hearings that I wanted, and I'm speaking for me personally, but also from talking to other veterans in the community, these are the kind of hearings that we were talking about. Like one of them was indigent burials. How many veterans didn't have next of kins that passed away, that sat in the morgue? So we were looking at hearing topics that were going to be relevant to the community, that would try to get some answers. It wasn't all to be hung up on the agency, but to at least get some answers as to where are we? What is the data showing us? What does the data look like? What do the numbers look like? And, unfortunately, we haven't gotten any of that. And that's kind of still where we are.
This is part 1. We're going to do part 2, because I think what Joe has mentioned is something that, whether you're in Louisville, Kentucky, or you're in, Jacksonville, North Carolina, or Daytona Beach, Florida, or Lubbock, Texas, these are the same issues, but on a local level. And I want Joe, because he's done a lot of community organizing, and there's a lot of change, and there's like challenges in New York City, but at least there's a mechanism to kind of get things going. Joe has been a veteran council member, for some time, an advisor. The thing about it is, I want to get from Joe's playbook, what are the essentials? Like, let's say if I was living in Lubbock, Texas, and there's just the state veteran office and that's it, and then the VA. And like, how would, to bring veterans and civilians together to empower the veteran community? How what can be done?
Well, it's like they say, all politics are local. So everything starts locally. So if I'm living in Texas or Arizona or Florida, we're all looking for community. So first and foremost is organizing community. And that's really the challenge right then and there. Organizing the community and educating the civilians as to what we went through or what we're experiencing, and making them allies in what it is we're trying to do, whatever that topic is. But first and foremost, it's about organizing the community. We all have shared experiences, no matter what service we were in, whether it's basic training or any of those or any other. So I think that's where it starts. For me, that's where it starts. We organize, we get together, we start having conversations about what some of the issues are in general, what the issues are in particular. Maybe look, the VA just went through its AIR commissioning, where they were looking to close down a number of VA hospitals. That brought a lot of vets together, no matter where you were.
And on the local level. So then this thing that you're talking about, this is a federal, they want to close down Brooklyn, they want to close down Manhattan VA, but you're saying the local community of veterans got together and created some change?
That's exactly what it is. It's a shared issue that affects, veterans of all ages. And so you started to see veterans, and, not just veterans like on the street, but also veterans within the veteran service organizations come together. Senator Schumer did a rally. Veterans came to it of all ages, women, men, everybody came together and, and had the same message that we didn't want to see that happen. But that's the kind of messaging, that's the kind of way you work through issues. Like when there's an issue in your local community, there has to be a strategic plan of how you're going to deal with that issue. What is it that we want to do? What is it we want to see happen from our elected officials? And there has to be a shared common ground in it, and then a plan of action to carry that out. And while you're doing that, there's a need to educate not only just other elected officials, but the civilian population as well, as to why we need it, why we're trying to do what we're trying to do. And once you can get through that, then things start, really starts to become the nuts and bolts of what the policy is going to look like. Who's on board, who's not, how do you overturn that? Are there elected officials that maybe are trying to talk to other veterans to try to get them to not go along with it? And it really becomes coming together to try to really just stay as a unit and accomplish whatever that goal or mission is.
Great. You've always had a passion for veterans, and you've always impressed me, from a local level. We just heard about the local level. But now I want to shift because, it's like 2014, we had, General Shinseki, dismissed pretty much. And then people thinking, oh, it's a miracle. We need to just forget about, our advocacy and our role, as far as like fighting for very important things. And I'm just trying to find out, what are your priorities regarding dealing with the federal VA right now? What do you think needs to be rectified?
I think on the federal level, I think that they need to rectify the Mission Act. I think that the problem, moving forward is going to be, there's not enough money for the Mission Act. And so I think at some point the VA and the federal government itself is going to have to rectify how much money gets put into that. What is the eligibility? They may even have to consider changing some of that eligibility.
Can you explain to some people the Mission Act?
Well, the Mission Act was basically where if I could not get an appointment to a VA hospital within a certain period of time, or I lived a certain distance from a VA hospital, I could get assistance. I could get medical services from a civilian practitioner that was certified by the VA. So, and then the VA would obviously pay for that service that I was using.
And
And
so,
that's a bare bones nutshell of what it was.
right. And so do you think the role of the veteran in this particular issue is to look at promoting the Mission Act as far as getting those resources? Because we see our defense budget, $1 trillion, and so when they tell me that, I'm saying there should be more funds going to veteran issues.
Well, I mean, remember the Department of Veterans Affairs has the second biggest budget next to the Department of Defense.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily say the money's not there. It's just a question of how much money is being allocated per certain programs and what they're trying to do. Again, as we look past through the years, going back, 30, 40 years, the VA has taken on more, starting to do more. I mean, if you look recently, the VA said that it would handle abortions in the case of, and that's something that hadn't been done before. So, you have seen the VA over the past several decades grow in its mission, expand, and the challenges that have come with it, lack of nurses, shortage of doctors, and that's, I talk about that, the VA, but that's also other regular hospitals as well. The VA doesn't pay the same as, like, say, if I was a nurse at NYU or at, Presbyterian Hospital. It's a very different kind of animal in of itself. So there's a lot of challenges there.
There's a lot of challenges. At the same time, I'm a little bit caught up with that. I forgot the guy who was the governor candidate for Virginia, Gans or something like that. He is the big push for privatization for all VA. He wrote that book last November, Warrior, Hurt a Warrior or something like that. And basically, even starting to read it, I wasn't sure like what he was trying to push. Was it to totally make it, completely private? Because we all know that there's a big conflict of interest there, because all the officials end up working for Aetna, or after their
TRICARE West.
career. Yeah,
or
exactly.
TRICARE West.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's problematic, because the different issues that he's made in regards to the VA, being public and just being inefficient and not being effective. That's, you and I both know that, when the audits have been done for, many, many years by, reputable auditors, third-party auditors, they've always have given a lot of high marks, even during the Shinseki debacle,
Correct.
Matter of fact, there was a lot of, if it wasn't for Shinseki, that, a lot of the claims issues wouldn't have been, resolve Agent Orange, issues. It was Shinseki and that administration that did a lot of good. Yeah, there was a lot of lacking, but all administrations have their strong points and their weak points. But to totally move into this issue of privatization, what are your thoughts? And I'm not bashing the book or the person. I'm just trying to understand the different arguments.
Sure. No, I mean, look, personally, I'm against privatization. I think, as surveys every year have shown, most veterans prefer VA service. They like it. It's good. Again, a VA hospital is a place where a lot of camaraderie takes place. A lot of things happen. So I don't necessarily, I'm not for privatization. I do recognize the fact that there are some issues where, again, there's not maybe a doctor there, especially if you're a rural veteran, you live out in Montana or somewhere, you need that service a lot more closer, and that's where the Mission Act comes in. So, but for me personally, I've never really understood the argument for privatization. I've never been a proponent of it. I personally like my VA service. I think it's quality care. So, again, I think this was a look, and a lot of people saw a lot of dollar signs and a way to like, hey, let's make it, we could do this, we can make money. And I think that's where they started to go off the rails with it.
Yes. Suzanne Gordon has written in the position of promoting the VA as being a public institution, and she goes into history and all the surveys in Wounds of War, how the VA delivers health, healing, and hope to the nation's veterans. And I read an article that she wrote, and it did make sense. And I would add, just like you added about the rural veterans, I would say, the homeless, that, with privatization, you're going to limit homeless vets, whereas now a homeless vet, people don't understand, it's easier for a homeless vet to get health care, immediate health care through the VA than through the regular system, like public hospitals and everything.
Correct.
That care would have to be, whether it's me, or you, or that homeless person, homeless vet, there would be an exact level of care obligated. That homeless veteran can go to the patient advocate and make a complaint just like you and I could make. Unlike, going to a public hospital, where in many ways public hospitals are great, but we all know that there are public hospitals, certain localized public hospitals and private hospitals, that there's in many ways difficult bureaucracies, whereas the VA has one way, and we can easily navigate through that because we've already got that culture of simplicity in many ways.
Well, I would also add in that, in the public hospitals, and one of the things that we've started to see, particularly around the Mission Act, is a lot of these doctors and nurses in the public sector don't have the cultural competency to deal with veterans. And so that also becomes a problem. Like, one of the things here in New York is we don't know how many veterans are actually using the public healthcare system here versus the VA hospitals. And that's something else as well. It's if we had that kind of data, we'd be able to, we would be able to kind of share that and see what is it that the VA is not doing, or what is it that the public hospitals are doing, that these veterans are using public facilities rather than coming into the VA.
Yeah, the gentleman that I'm talking about is Daniel Gade, and so he ran for governor, and I think he was supposed to be the ethics. I think for the last term of the Trump administration for the VA, he was in some position involving ethics. And my thing is that he wrote this book, Wounding. I believe it's Wounding Warriors: How Bad Policy is Making Veterans Sicker and Poorer. And a lot of the premise is that, he was, God bless him, and he's a true hero in combat. But what I try to say, including with guys like Dan Crenshaw, they're incredible warriors in combat. But at the same time, in the civilian world, you're no better than I am. I'm not better than you. We're both veterans, no matter what rank we are. And the bottom line is, he had suffered some serious wounds, and I'm sorry for that. And he's transcended those wounds. And so he's trying to say the example, just like Dan Crenshaw, who lost an eye, and he's saying, well, pick up your bootstraps and carry on. And that we have this culture of kind of making the veteran worse through this system that we have. What can you say that would counter that? Because that to a certain extent, that is valid for certain vets, but I don't know if that's every vet that I've seen, like in the VA day to day. I think they have valid issues.
Well, I think that's part of the problem. So, like, I know for me, one of the things like I talk about is that, to particularly to civilians, is that not all veterans are damaged. There's this culture of PTSD and military sexual trauma, and granted, there are veterans who have that and who have to deal with that, and we understand that. But the drumbeat of that leads the civilian population to believe all veterans are damaged. We're all damaged. We all go in and we're grinded up, and then we come out and we're all poor damaged, and we need help, and that's not really, it's really what we're looking for. Again, it's transitional issues in some cases. It's looking for a hand up, not a handout, and getting reacclimated back into civilian. I have a friend of mine who runs a program, and he likes to say, when you go in, you're a recruit, but they never teach you how to decruit. And that's a real big issue there. So, I don't take away from anybody's experience or what they've had. I think I would just say is, look, for those that are advocating for privatization, I'm wondering who are they talking to? Is anybody lobbying them? Are they making money somewhere off?
So yeah, that's very important.
It is.
But yeah, that dialogue, because it's not criticizing someone, but if there's a vested interest in one type of lobby, I know Gabe set up a certain, I believe it's a new super PAC, or not a super PAC, but a PAC, you know what I mean? And he has every right to do that, but to understand where these dialogues are coming from, right? And all we're doing is presenting them as Suzanne Gordon's dialogue with Daniel Gade's dialogue. And where does every vet at least know where these positions are coming from?
And I like to say, one of the problems is, when you talk about OIF or OEF vets, we're looking at a 20-year plus war, and I break it down to, you've got those who served from, like, let's say 2001 to, like, let's say 2012, and then those who served from 2012 to 2021. There's a very different experience there. Very different experience, everything was very different. Some went through some real horrific stuff. Some just did a tour and came back. Everything very different. So it's a very different experience, even though they all are OIF or OEF, or New Dawn veterans.
Right. And then I appreciate you saying that, because at times certain people that have gone from the military officer corps and they've come into like the veteran world, they'll take up a lot of these positions of leadership, but not know like a lot of the issues. And I have nothing against the former New York City director for veteran affairs, but Dr. Sutton, General Sutton, I mean, it was like she came off of active duty, didn't really know anything about what was happening in New York, and took on this position. And you see this over and over again. And it's like, just because you took leadership in the military, it doesn't mean that you're actually going to know everything in regards to the veteran.
Correct. And then she got tasked with building an agency, which she really didn't know, like, it got left to her. So yeah, absolutely. That was,
and it's not just her, right? You hear these stories again, like Dan Crenshaw and Joe Rogan was talking about military disability retirement, the when you're medically retired, which happened to my sister. And I'm saying, well, it's very different because my sister was an officer, Dan Crenshaw was an officer. But what is it like if you're an E2 and you get medically retired and you only get 30% of of an E2 pay? 30 that's very different than being 04 pay and getting 100 and getting 50% of your retirement, right? That's a good chunk of money coming in. And then you're eligible pretty much for the VA compensation, which compounds your income. And so all of these different things, plus you have like a bachelor's degree already because you went to West Point or to some elite school. That's a different readjustment than Joe Schmucatelli, who is coming out of the military. And I made this point on the Ben Burgess show. I was like, this guy is making a comment, and I respect him for his combat, but he's making comments about the medical boards that are not easy to pass. And he's kind of claiming that, oh, everybody's getting, a whole bunch of roses and chocolates, when they're medically retired. And that's just not the case, especially for low ranking people. Again, it doesn't even have to be combat. It could be you're on ship and you bang your head and you're out. You know what I mean? People don't understand that. And
I know. And I mean, look, even you're right. And even the jobs that they talk about, you see the officers, there are a lot of them go for the Wall Street jobs, the high end jobs, and the enlisted, they're offering them, and I see it today, they offer them security jobs.
Security, laundry,
yeah,
truck drivers, yeah. And so those are things that we've been talking about for 2 decades, if not before. And,
and this is why you're seeing, let me just say this is why you're seeing the rise of entrepreneurism. Because a lot of veterans have gotten fed up with being pigeonholed into security and all this other stuff. And a lot of and they're going for their education, but a lot of them want to be their own bosses. They've been under all these officers and senior enlisted for all these years, and a lot of them I want to be my own boss. Unfortunately, though, a lot of them are just failing at entrepreneurship because they the plan is not written out. It's not fully thought out. And the economy and the environment we're in today is not conducive. It's difficult. It can be done, but it's difficult.
I want to ask you this, and I want to prepare for part 2 in the future, folks. But I want to ask you this before we end, and then get your final words. But can you explain to people what are the statistics when they say, oh, veterans have a low unemployment rate, but in reality, we all know that if you're going to school part-time, they consider you employed. There's if you're couch surfing, you're considered as not being homeless. If you're, there's all these different things. And I was just wanting to get your perspective on that and just to educate, veterans and civilians regarding, what a lot of the news would say, as far as, oh, veterans, they're thriving in these new jobs and all that. And in reality, the unemployment rate is not always as accurately as it could be reported.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I mean, look, there are a lot of veterans, just like the civilian population, who have fallen through the cracks, who are not looking for employment, who are going through things, whether it's going to school part-time, full-time, 3/4 of a time, maybe don't have a job, maybe living off their disability. There are a lot of them that we don't have. And that's been the problem when it comes to veterans data. One of the things I like to say is we've now passed 2 censuses. And in the past 2 censuses, we have not taken a census of veterans. We're basically given kind of a guesstimate from the ACS. And it's kind of okay, this is what we believe based upon, we're extrapolating the number of deaths between World War II, Korea, Vietnam vets. And so this is what we think the population will look like by 2045. But we don't really have an idea because we haven't done a census in the last 2 decades that included veterans in it. So, even when we get to places like here in New York City, we're lacking data. It's so funny. I didn't really, back in the day, didn't believe in data. And, then when I finally went into the city council and we started questioning the Veterans Agency about its data numbers, you can give us a number, but if there's no context to that number, how are we supposed to understand that number? For example, they at one point during the last administration, they told us that they housed 1,000 veterans. And we're great, 1,000 veterans, it's awesome. And then we asked them, okay, how many were recidivism? How many were single women veterans? How many were families? No answer. So you can't put it, and we asked them, most importantly, how long did it take you to house those 1,000 veterans? So without the answers to those numbers, to kind of understand the context of that data, you housed 1,000 veterans, it's just a number. That's right. Great. We have no idea how you did that.
Right. And that's the point that we're making about all these other problems that we have within our community that we're trying to figure out. And you're saying something that's valid, in the data collection, analysis, and presentation are definitely lacking in many ways. And I want to get
Correct.
deeper into this. In our next episode, we're going to do part 2, and we're going to talk deeper about the data on some other issues, and we're going to revisit some other things. I want to talk about the Danny Chen case. I want to talk about special populations, within the VA. You're the guru, and I really appreciate you being on here. Any last words until the next time?
Well, until the next time, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. I look forward to our next one.
Thanks a lot. And there you have it. This is Veteran Etc. And this is part of Coming Home Well Network. And they're just fantastic. And if you want to see more videos tied to that, check out cominghomewell.com. Thank you very much.
You gotta have a good night.
Good night.
Veteran Etc. invites you to join us again with your host, Mike Kim, every Sunday. If the content from this podcast is informative to you, please share the podcast with others. Give a like and/or post something you learned from the episode on social media. If interested in other truly informative podcasts like Veteran Etc., check out cominghomewell.com for a listing of other veteran-based podcasts. Thank you for tuning in.